somebody demonstrates a willingness not to jump to a false understanding, to a convenient explanation, to be in the unknown, the threat of collapse or even the reality of collapse would force us to change. And I no longer believe that. That's not really a change.
In Bodhi Sangha, we keep on talking about that there are toxic binaries. There is simplicity in those extremes. And when you try to move towards the gray, it's complex.
My country is devolving into very intense polarization.
I think it's happening everywhere, that there is that kind of divide.
We are ready to become something different in relation to each other and in relation to the world. This rigid distinction between the root and the symptom is not the deepest truth. And that maybe the only way to get to the root is through the symptom. If you do that enough times, then the roots will die also. It's not comfortable, but you're not pushed by a feeling of something is wrong. I have to know, I have to understand. And if I don't figure it out, then terrible things will happen.
Welcome to the Bodhi Sangha Podcast, where we come together to listen, learn, and support each other in uncertain times. We're a community exploring how to face today's challenges with wisdom, trust, and care. Join us as we walk this journey of change, rooted in connection and guided by life's deeper wisdom.
Namaste. Welcome to yet another Bodhi Sangha podcast. Today, the guest here is Charles Eisenstein, a dear friend. It's been 5 years that we have not connected. This is a good opportunity. We'll talk about so many things. I would take the opportunity to share some bit about Bodhi Sangha. In Bodhi Sangha, we are trying to understand what is meta crisis and trying to relay it to others in Indian context. Our comfort is in the wisdom of gray, relational field. And hence, we do lots of co-sensing and try to come up with some coordinated actions on our ecosystem levels that can serve the needs of our context. So that's what we do in Bodhi Sangha. And I would also take this opportunity to share some personal plus informal organic introduction of Charles, because Charles is famous. He doesn't want to be a thought leader, but for us, he's a big thought leader, and he's like our audience, and people in our ecosystem really know him. Though we have very tiny audience right now, but in future, if we grow the audience, we want them to really know you. Stays with me that I was sharing with him in check-in too is once he shared in a call that how we have to travel from the story of separation, dissociation, to the story of interbeing, interconnectedness, and interdependence. And that's like something that he shared at that time, and that really informed our work. And there are so many such things that he does, and that kind of inspires, influence people in our context, in our ecosystem. Lots of friends, they really admire you, Charles, a lot. Like if Abhishek, one of our friend and who's working in Bodhi Sangha, he was telling me that once he went to your website and clicked for a book, and that said that you can download free PDF and you can buy it too. And he was telling me that I've never uh, experienced something like this. So it's not that Charles only writes books like Sacred Economics. He also and one book that I think its title inspired lots of people. The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, and that really stayed with so many people, and so many people talk about it. And last book is The Coronation, in which he shared. I mean, it's a compilation of lots of articles, but in that he actually shared vulnerably what he was going through in COVID time. So it was like really interesting to read those articles. He does podcasts too. He has some courses. One I was part of, that was the Sanity Project, and another was Living in the Gift. And there are other that I don't remember, but he's been doing amazing things. He has four sons, and he's like raising those kids very beautifully. So that also something that I can relate to and connect to. So there are so many things that we have, and I really like that kind of connection. Though we have never met in person, but we really admire you in our ecosystem. So that's about Charles. Charles, thank you
Thank you.
for saying yes to this podcast. Though you are saying that you have stopped doing public speaking, but still you came for this podcast. It means a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, I still do a little bit, but yeah, things have changed, and I just don't feel the ambition anymore to do that. I can tell myself that people have all kinds of reasons to explain what they do, and the reasons could be, well, this is the way to make an impact, and maybe all those reasons are not wrong, but when I don't feel it internally, then I lose my motivation. And those moments of when you lose your motivation and question what you're doing are very precious, because then you become aware of other opportunities and other directions. And that's the phase that I've been in for quite a while now, a few years.
Yeah, that's like both the things, the gift and something that you have to leave behind. So it's painful too. But I think what I'm curious right now after listening to you, if you can describe the thread that kind of connects now all your diverse interest and the writing that you've been doing or speaking. But there is this thread that I'm curious, because now things are changing for you too. So do you see any thread that can describe the connection?
It's really the what you already mentioned, like that hasn't changed. When you spoke of transitioning from a story of separation to a story of interbeing, and my function here is to be a agent of that change. It's not so much, the way you said it isn't quite the way I think of it. It's not so much, okay, we have to change right now, we have to make this change. Even that, on some level of we have to, is part of the old story. And because if you really take apart, what does that mean? What does we have to mean? Sometimes it means, well, you better do it or bad things are going to happen, or it'll be too late, or you won't be a good person, your spiritual growth will be stunted. Like what does have to actually mean? There's a note of compulsion. And I've been thinking more and more in terms of choice rather than compulsion. Even when it comes in my earlier work, my earlier books, I assumed that the threat of collapse, or even the reality of collapse, would force us to change. And I no longer believe that. I believe that human creativity is virtually unlimited, and that we can continue to adapt to a sickening and dying planet and a sickening and dying society. That we won't ever reach a point where we say, well, we'd love to continue destroying the ecosystems, but we can't do that anymore, so we better change. That's not really a change. That's simply a new application of the principle of separation, the principle of a self-interest that's disconnected from the interests of the other. A real change would be, yeah, we could survive we could continue to grow our GDP as we destroy the rest of life, but we don't want to do that anymore. We are ready to become something different in relation to each other and in relation to the world. That would be a genuine change. Not that we're finally frightened into behaving ourselves. That I guess if you're asking for
Thread.
a line of connection,
Yeah,
that would be it. Yes.
yeah, makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. I was also thinking that when you shared, and this question was coming to my head, that since I know lots of people in my circle that they have been influenced by your speaking, your writing, and so otherwise, what patterns have you kind of noticed about when and why people tend to resonate with some message? It is your message or other message, which you were saying that the collapse is actually not making them change, but there is some sort of inherent resilience that humans have, and we have to. So, what kind of when and why people tend to resonate to this kind of messages?
I think it's when they approach a point of readiness, when the story that they're living in isn't working for them anymore. If your story is working for you, I have nothing to say, really.
Yeah.
Except I love you, brother. I'm glad that you're happy. I'm glad that it's working for you. It's not like, the story that we inhabit is a container for our growth and a container for our lives, for the relationships, for the dramas that we're playing, and those need to reach a point of fulfillment before they're ready to change. And when they have reached that point, when the drama is complete, when Act 2 of the play is finished, then we're ready for Act 3. And then we're ready for a new storyline to come in, and we're open to that. And, probably all of us have friends, relatives who seem very stuck. It can be very frustrating that they're stuck in the old story. But, who are we to say that your story is wrong, that you should live in a different story? How do you know that? How do you know that they're, haven't finished with it yet? Even if it looks like it's making them miserable, maybe they're not done yet. And when I see things that way, I ask, if my role isn't to shake them loose, what is my role? How can I be a agent of their evolution? And it might just be, loving presence. I might not be the hero in this story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is not just for people, but it's also for societies, for countries, This has been, my writing recently has been very much about peace in a political context, because my country is devolving into very intense polarization, and each side hating the other side and demonizing the other side. And I've been saying, hey, hold on. The problem in this country isn't the horrible people on the other side, okay? We're all coming from a set of experiences that make it inevitable that we see the world the way that we do. But I have been having the feeling of, if two dogs are about to fight, and you walk between them to try to stop them fighting, what happens is that they bite you. So I'm starting to get that feeling right now, and I'm like, okay, maybe they just have to fight, and I can be available afterwards to help, treat the wounded and put things back together again.
I mean, when you are saying that, what really struck with me is again, the wisdom of gray that I was talking about in the beginning. In Bodhi Sangha, we keep on talking about that there are toxic binaries, and there is simplicity in those extremes. And when you try to move towards the gray, it's complex, and people don't like that kind of complexity, and they want to go back to simplicity. uh,
Yeah.
Extremes are more comforting in that way. And when you are in the gray, you might be typecasted as you are not taking the stand, because there is no stand. So those kind of things come. And what you were sharing, what's happening in your country, I think it's happening everywhere. That there is that kind of divide, and it's that separation we see even ecologically. In one of your talks, you shared that if you really want to cut the tree, you really need to kind of dehumanize, or the make the tree more like a non-living thing, so that you can cut it. Otherwise, it would be very difficult.
Right.
If you see yourself or your expansion in the tree, it would be difficult to cut it. So these kind of separations, disconnections, binaries are everywhere. And because it is connected, can you share some examples of polarized issues where a third way or reconciliation might be possible now in our context, like in US or India or anywhere else?
I mean, there's, I think, a third way on every issue. It's just, again, are we ready for that? Are we ready to abandon the simplifying narratives that conveniently explain everything by naming a bad guy and blaming it all on them? Like, that is a particular drama that we're very used to because it drives so much of, popular entertainment, mass culture, superhero stories. Like, a lot of film is driven by this kind of narrative, and a lot of political discourse too. For example, the environmental movement now is mostly talking, for years it's been this way, talking about global warming, climate change, which also fits this simplifying narrative. There's a bad guy, carbon or greenhouse gases, that if you that explains everything. Like, every environmental problem is because of that now, and the solution therefore is very simple. So those who don't accept that are then the enemy. But underneath that division, there's actually a lot of agreement that, for example, about toxic pollution, for example, or forest fires, or habitat loss. People, nobody wants to see songbirds disappearing. Nobody wants to see rivers drying up and lakes drying up, as is happening in India, I believe.
Yeah.
And there are very concrete things that can be done about those problems that don't involve changing the entire global system of energy production.
Right.
But as long as all of the debate is about that, then none of these immediate solutions are even going to be discussed.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fixation on the simplifying narratives paralyzes us.
Right.
Same thing in a relationship too. If a couple is fighting, if a couple is getting divorced, then normally speaking, each one of them has a very simple explanation for what's wrong. It's the other person. And as long as they are locked in that, there will be no solution. The only solution is war, when you're facing somebody who's evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, it also reminds me that how we can have the combination of exploring the roots, or the root systems and the symptoms. Like, most of the time, there is this binary that we talk about only symptoms, and we distinguish between the treating the symptoms versus addressing the root causes. And what happens that both are needed. And most of the time, there is this binary that, okay, we should be systemic, and there is some people who are doing the patchwork. And somehow I feel there is also something that needs to come in the gray, that both are needed, but somehow when you are doing the patchwork, you need to connect with the systemic part. Because without diagnosing, if you'll just treat the symptoms, that would also not solve, which we are seeing in our social sphere. So in that way, if there are any current examples that actually are focusing more, I mean, there are so many, but more on the symptoms and missing the deeper story.
Yeah, it's interesting. Many years ago, I did some translation for a Taiwanese Chan master, a Zen master. And in one of his lectures, I remember this was maybe, almost 30 years ago.
When you were in China.
I was in Taiwan. I lived in
Taiwan.
Taiwan then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a question that was put to him about the symptoms, and the futility of just addressing symptoms. And he said, it's like a weed that comes up. If you cut off the weed, but you leave the roots there, then the weed will grow back
Yes.
again and again. He said, but if you do that enough times, then the roots will die also.
Mm.
And I think that what you were saying is that this rigid distinction between the root and the symptom is not the deepest truth. And that maybe the only way to get to the root is through the symptom.
Mm.
The only way so I think the Chan master Shengyan, his name was talking about bad habits, and like say your bad habit is that you're shouting at your children, okay, and you can use your discipline and your mindfulness to stop shouting at your children. Every time that you feel the urge, you suppress it. And many people would say, but you're not getting at the root. Why are you so angry? Why are you so impatient? But his point was that if you continue doing that enough times, then you will actually get at the root. You will actually understand eventually and heal at that level. And I don't know, I could translate this to I'm not sure actually what the orientation of your community here is. Like, are we talking, should I talk more about the social political level or the inner relational level? But
both go hand in hand. You cannot do outer transformation without inner. So it's mirroring. So we can touch both.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So if you're talking about something like poverty, there's certainly a very strong leftist criticism of anti-poverty efforts that merely make capitalism a little less brutal, that assuage, that ameliorate the worst and most visible harms of capitalism, and thereby even some radical critics would say that philanthropy is essential to the maintenance of capitalism, and that we should do away with philanthropy in order to intensify the injustice, so that we can be motivated, so that the proletariat is now so miserable that they have no alternative but to overthrow the system. There's a certain inhumanity and harshness to that view, because philanthropy is actually part of what makes capitalism not as bad as the left sees it. It's an integral part of capitalism. It's the inevitable expression of the conscience, of the discomfort with living well off the labors of others. Like there's like on some level, people recognize that if not for the grace of God, they would be the boss and I would be the worker. Like the humans have, and that might be a very deeply buried understanding. It might be buried under a lot of arrogance and a lot of entitlement, a lot of delusion. But on some soul level, we all understand that we are equal in the eyes of God. And that understanding expresses in capitalism, expresses through philanthropy. So you cannot actually separate capitalism from philanthropy. They're part of the whole system. And so when you evaluate capitalism and its harms and benefits, you have to include that. I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent here about symptoms and root. But I guess offering that just as an example of the complexity that becomes available when you don't so rigidly hold to these binary categories. Yeah.
I mean, I feel that there is this extreme that we also see in the social sector, that some people are working on systemic issues and they demean the welfare work, and those who are doing the welfare work would find the people who are working on systemic issues abstract and ambiguous. So that there
Right.
is that thing that we see, and nobody is seeing that we need to work together. But anyway, but also there is one thing, maybe I'm little conditioned to think it like that, but there is one nuance, that there are so many NGOs or so many people in social sector. They've been doing welfare work, but somehow it's very difficult for them to connect the dots. It's very difficult. I mean, somehow this deep cultural narrative about progress and technology is preventing us from seeing these deeper causes. But that is also happening. I understand that there is this
Right.
binary, but at the same time, some people are not able to see it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really important, because if you don't have the systemic awareness, then it's very likely that your welfare projects, your immediate solutions to address symptoms are actually going to make the cause worse.
yeah,
So this happens a lot in education, which we're both familiar with, where someone without a systemic understanding might think that the solution is to build a school. And if you just blindly do that and build the kind of school that is being built everywhere else, then you contribute to the destruction of community and culture and ways of knowing locally by replacing those with an education that was designed thousands of miles away and is designed to bring people out of their community and local culture and into a global monoculture where they become part of the global labor pool. So if you don't have that radical understanding, then we have illiteracy. Let's maybe even force everybody to go to school. Let's increase the penalties for truancy. Let's and so there's many ways that I think that the systemic and understanding has to merge with the hands-on practical local problems. Yeah.
I mean, to do any systemic change, or even if you are working on that systemic change, one, it is slow, and then the people who might be supporting you, they need to have trust, because it is transformational. So systemic work is also kind of little complex, nuanced, and slow. And that is also, I think, is the reason that people generally don't see it worthy of like immediate action that they need to do. And I feel another, which I'm transitioning from here, which is also one of the important thing that you talk about, is embracing the uncertainty. And I feel in systemic change, somehow you have to engage with the not knowing part. And that is not that comfortable. Uncertainty that we need to acknowledge, and the discomfort that it brings, and the foundational assumptions that we have to challenge, staying in the uncertainty, it's very difficult to navigate, and it's complex problem without any certainty. So my question here to you is, your work often invites us into the space of not knowing, uh, in a culture which is obsessed with certainty and solutionism, somehow that reductionist tunnel vision that they need, which brings them the certainty. How can we become more comfortable with uncertainty? I mean, it's a vague question. How? But if you can give some examples, personal examples maybe, how you embrace uncertainty.
It's funny to frame that in terms of how.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really a how question. I think that it's more about companionship in uncertainty, that we can learn to be comfortable or tolerant of uncertainty in ourselves through the example of others. That when somebody demonstrates a willingness not to jump to a false understanding, to a convenient explanation, to be in the unknown, then it signals that that's okay to do that. It gives us permission to abide in that
Hmm.
space between stories, in that unknowing. Maybe it's not comfortable, but at least you're not pushed by a feeling of something is wrong. I have to know, I have to understand. And if I don't figure it out, then terrible things will happen. Because that hurry, that rush to understand as soon as possible, that pushes us into false explanations
Mm.
that are usually not anything new. They're usually another version of what came before.
Yeah, so relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think as far as the how goes, it's really it's something that everyone already knows how. It's just, do you give yourself permission to do that? And if we can create a culture where that's okay, for example, a culture where you're not only rewarded for coming up with the right answer as quickly as possible, like happens in school. In school, we're not encouraged to not know. Yeah, I mean, I guess that could be an excuse to just not even learn, but that's not it. It's in fact, when you are okay with not knowing right away, you're much better able to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many people have already, so many philosophers have already talked about it, that you need to keep your vessel empty.
Yeah.
But in this, one thing that when you were talking about that companionship, I was also thinking that in Bodhi Sangha we talk about that the real response to meta crisis is relational field, creating that nurturing field where work is more like an instrument for working on yourself in between each other, and how to build that strength and understand each other, and have that kind of relationship where you really start giving significance to conflict, giving significance to that discomfort that you share in that space when you don't know how we would move forward. So that is something that is very important and dear to us, and we keep giving lots of time to our relational field for last 12 13 years, and right now we see that it's very important, and we need to keep working on that on the larger scale, and one important part in that which I want to ask you, that do you think that there is a relationship with uncertainty has some connection with a relationship with control?
And this is really a deep part of the story of separation, the necessity to control things, because the story of separation that puts us separate from the universe, separate. This alienation, basically, it says that we live in an arbitrary, mechanical universe, that being is only in human beings, but not in matter. Matter is soulless, and arbitrary, random. It's just chaos. And human progress means to impose order onto chaos. It means to control things better and better. And the triumph of the human race has been to increase our capacity to control through
Yeah.
technology and through science. So if you're not in control, that means that you're vulnerable. It is in that story, it is foolish to not be in control, because then all of the other separate selves and random forces of nature will victimize you. You have to be dominant. You have to be in power, because it's everyone's out for themselves. We're all separate individuals. More for you is less for me.
Yeah.
So I have to protect myself against you. I have to be in control. So whether it's against the random forces of nature or the self-interested competing selves out there, control is a necessity in the story of separation. So there's a deep anxiety built into that. When you are, when you don't know, when you can't explain things, then you're not in control anymore. And our story says that that is dangerous and that you must get in control as soon as possible. And control depends on understanding, just as technology depends on science. When people have a spiritual experience and know themselves not just as a separate individual, but as either unity consciousness or as interconnected and interexistent with all things, there's a huge relief. There's a letting go. They feel like they don't need to be in control of everything anymore. They feel at home in the universe. And they are then able to trust intelligence beyond themselves.
Makes lots of sense. Uh, and I was also thinking that all these modern issues, or the level of disconnections that we have, disconnection with self and people around us, the community, and the other beings. I think there is some bridge that needs to be built between the modern challenges and the ancient wisdom that we already have, like how exploring how traditional knowledge offers some alternative frameworks for existing problems, like if we and because you have also explored that a lot, the traditional wisdom and indigenous knowledge systems. And so I also feel that it would be good to kind of connect this with that, and maybe if you can share some of the teachings have been most transformative in your own understanding of our current crisis that we are going through. What are those teachings, and if they are relatable, and if we can put them in a simpler way that audience can also connect to, because sometimes those teachings are very complex. So if you have any, it would be
Yeah. I can't. I don't do it that way. I don't have this uh, reservoir of teachings that I can articulate in an abstract way. It always depends on the situation.
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends, like, yeah, you have to bring up a specific situation, and then maybe I'm not actually that well studied in spiritual traditions. I've read a little bit, but I'm not any kind of scholar or any kind of yogi or anything like that.
Mm.
But sometimes I might read some spiritual books, Tao Te Ching or the Gita, or Sufi things. I've read some things, and maybe I remember something from those things sometimes. But yeah, that's not really how I operate. I don't have a list of spiritual teachings, so it's really hard for me to answer that question.
Maybe not spiritual, maybe something that you might have noticed in other indigenous people, or how they operate, or how they see
Well,
crisis.
from what I've observed, what unifies indigenous worldviews is that they know that the world is alive and see everything in it as alive in some sense, or a being in some sense. Even they won't say that a stone is alive in the same way that a tree or a mouse is alive, but they believe that a stone is a being
Mm.
and a cloud is a being. And therefore they're not alone in the universe, but they are one of many.
Yeah.
That that changes everything when you can see the world that way. And it's for someone who was raised in the religion of the West, the
Mm.
religion of science. Maybe in India, that understanding is not so far away as it is in my country. Maybe in India, it's only one or two generations that have been educated in the Western reductionist way of seeing the world. But here it's been, 7 or 8 generations.
In India, there is yes, definitely we have that gift, that the access to that kind of and original spirituality is there, but there is lots of spiritual bypass too. So, and there is lots of fakeness too. So it's like it's very difficult to really reach to those places. But yes, we have those places, and we are in that way blessed. But when you were talking about spirituality, I think I connect with that question, which you've also mentioned earlier, that what is the origin of the wrongness in the world? It's like that was your question when you were, I think, 36 or something, and you were exploring it. And you've also said that I cannot share it, uh, but in your book you have written something about it. Do you want to connect this with some spirituality, which, let's not put it in any teachings or anything. It's your inner spirituality maybe, but it would be good to hear something from there.
Well, what is the origin of the wrongness in the world? That's what led me to separation. That whether it's ecological or social or political, the perception of separation is what allows it all to happen, and that the story of separation takes many forms. For example, it takes the form of the money system that we have today, takes the form of the medical system that we have today, that makes the body into an object, and it generates the crises that beset us. It takes the form of the disintegration of community, where where the world is full of strangers and you don't know the stories of anyone around you. It takes the form of separation from nature, where the average American child now spends 7 minutes a day outdoors and probably can't name more than 5 trees, recognize more than 5 trees, knows the names of and the
All the
characteristics of hundreds of Pokemon, but no local plants.
Yeah.
and therefore is helplessly dependent on money and the things that money can buy.
Yeah.
So all of these are a kind of, and because of the separation with nature, it's very easy to destroy nature.
Yeah.
We do it every day without even knowing it. Every time we use technology or drive a car or use an appliance or turn on the electricity, something beautiful is being destroyed and we don't even recognize it or know that it's happening. That's all separation. It's not malice.
Mm.
It's not that we wish ill on the exploited laborers in Vietnam or Bangladesh. It's not that we have a hostile attitude toward the whales or the fish or the rainforest. Like that's an example of the simplified wrong narratives
Yeah.
that say that bad things in the world are happening because of bad people doing it on purpose. Villains. No, it's because of separation. That's why I asked what story can replace the story of separation that will create healing rather than harm, rather than illness. And that's when I began working with the story of interbeing.
Yeah. Intense. It's really very difficult to accept. In my initial years, I would definitely like put the finger on some person who might be doing it, but then now it's very difficult to see that one person can do something like this, even with the understanding of war mentality and all those kind of things. Um, it's some sort of like how Daniel talks about the Moloch, is some
Yeah.
sort of Moloch or superorganism, how Nate puts it. It's working on all of us, and we are all Molochized in some ways. And the manifestation of that might be happening through the story of separation. And I also see the absence of sacred in the social work, like all the people with good intentions. There is some sort of absence of sacred in that. I feel what Bio talks about in post activism, and how he puts it, that we're not able to see beyond this mainstream activism and not able to see what really needs to be done, what is there to serve the needs of our context in a different way, and we're not able to see that. Around that, if you have any thoughts, how do we approach or shift that narrative, which is like putting the sacred endeavor rather than just socio-political ones.
So a lot of activism is the same mindset of that you were saying, to put your finger on the perpetrator and remove them from power and influence, name them as bad, humiliate them and shame them, tear down the statues because all of those white men owned slaves. But without asking, or did other bad things, but without asking, what are the conditions under which somebody does bad things? Because if the conditions don't change and you remove those people, then new people will do bad things. Even if you change the system, but you don't change the basic stories underneath the system, then a new system will come that replicates in maybe at a different form, but the same patterns of abuse.
Yeah.
This is what happened with communism. There were no more in Soviet Russia. There was, they had eradicated capitalism, but that didn't eradicate exploitation. It didn't eradicate a system where there are elites and differentials of power. much as they tried or pretended to try, and maybe at the beginning were sincere, because there are deeper patterns of, and I would say again, of separation, and of war mentality that inevitably will create opportunities for, exploitation and persecution and oppression to happen. The revolution did not go deeply enough. In fact, the revolution was on some level not a revolution at all, just a different version of the same story. Though, you invoked the word sacred. That word is invoked a lot now. Sacred activism, sacred masculinity, sacred this, sacred that, sacred commerce, sacred business,
Fully co-opted.
Yeah. But it does get at something. To me, something is sacred if it has an inherent worth and value beyond what it is useful for. So a sacred place, a sacred site, a sacred temple, where we recognize that God is here. And because of that, its utility, as to build a swimming pool there, or to cut down those trees and make some money, that's not as important because it has an inherent worth. Or when we understand a human being as sacred, then we're not going to exploit them for their labor. There's something important here beyond price, beyond instrumental utility. A sacred site, a sacred place, a sacred temple, that reminds us, that's the place where this truth is the most obvious. But it's the goal of the purpose of sacred sites isn't to tell us that some places are sacred and some are not. It's to open the gates of perception so that we can recognize the sacredness of all things. It's a kind of a practice ground that opens us to that recognition. And earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned that if we understand the sacredness of a tree and our non-separation from that tree, then we wouldn't cut it down. Well, we might still cut it down. I mean, we are in the world, and we eat other beings and ultimately are eaten by other beings. We interact, but we wouldn't cut it down abetted by an ideology that says that it's just wood. We would take into account its beingness, and therefore we would be very careful, very mindful. Like, are we using this for something beautiful that is worthy of its sacredness? To use it in that way, totally. We would, use it in a wasteful manner. And the same thing with other people's labor, and even our own labor too. If we understand I'm a sacred being, is this expression of my labor worthy? Does it do honor to my own sacredness? And if I ask you to do something, if I make a company and create jobs, and I do so in full recognition of your humanity and of all that you love and care about, and the fact that you have a family, and the fact that you have hopes and dreams, like, that's all truth, actually. If you operate otherwise, you're operating in a delusion. These are all delusions, that a tree is just wood or that a human being is just labor. You're not in reality here. So when we take in the full reality, we still might cut down the tree. We still might hire an employee, but it won't be in a pretense that they are not what they are. So that's where sacred, that's how sacred feeds into
I think two things that are very interesting that you've said. One is definitely that it opens the perspective. Those places which are sacred, they are not saying that the other places are not sacred, but they kind of gives us the opportunity to experience that sacred, and then we can experience it everywhere. And another important thing that is staying with me is sacred somehow takes us away from exploitation, takes us away from extraction. It just, you are plainly mindfully consuming, but you are not extractive or exploitative. So I mean, yes, I totally resonate with what you said, and makes lots of sense. It would be our last my last question, that after all this, what's emerging? Like, you have still, I mean, you have shared that you would start some blog and all that, but still, if something concrete which is emerging in your work now, that you are most excited about, or what are the other things that you feel can be shared differently so that they reach places, like maybe not thought leadership? What are the other modalities that you are excited about?
I'm actually quite excited to be doing things more behind the scenes. Um, I don't know, I'm going to Washington D.C. Tonight, actually, um, to connect with some of the um, people from the Maha movement, Make America Healthy Again. That was key to getting Trump elected. But fundamentally, the Maha movement is not, a right wing or uh, conservative tool. I mean, really, what the movement is about is reclaiming health from corporate control. And we got Kennedy in office as Secretary of Health and Human Services, but the Trump administration is doing a lot of very bad things in the environment and agriculture. And so I'm going to try to activate Maha as an independent political force to put pressure on the administration and Congress to align environmental and agricultural policy with the health of human beings, and understanding that human beings cannot be healthy if the rest of life is not healthy.
Totally.
So this is, on the more public outward level, this is something I want to put some energy into.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, so that's just one of the things. There's a lot of things that I'm going to also continue my normal blog, but maybe write more about personal things too, and maybe keep it a little tighter. Maybe some things I'm only going to write to the paid subscribers, but if someone can't conveniently pay, then I can give them free subscriptions. But I don't want to just broadcast personal stuff out too far, and then people attack me, and people don't play nice in politics.
Yeah.
So I want to make a distinction between what I'm saying as a public commentator on public affairs and what I'm saying in a more personal way. And then there's just a lot of stuff that I'm really prioritizing with family and my own healing and development that I don't need to talk about in public, but I will say that and encourage people to prioritize that in their lives and not always judge your life by the social, political, ecological change that you can see, but to understand yourself as a sacred being too. and be very generous and gentle and kind to yourself, as if you were a beloved child. People take, we need to give ourselves that nourishment, and then we'll end up being way more effective in other ways. But that's not the reason. It's not, don't instrumentalize yourself. You are precious. Intrinsically. And that's something that I've not done very well in my life. And that's a high priority for me now.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was amazing. After a long time, we could reconnect, and I feel nourished after this conversation. So thanks a lot for taking out your time and saying yes to this podcast. And I hope that we'll have more chances to have this kind of deep conversation, not on a podcast, maybe just on a call. And it would be good to invite you to meet our team sometime and connect with them too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
aware of the time. That's why I'm giving you 5 minutes buffer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really good to talk to you.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thanks.